If you ever take a vacation to Egypt, circa 500 BC, you're gonna notice some cool stuff. Egyptians loved board games. Men and women both wore makeup. Doctors practiced specialized medicine. Egyptian women enjoyed more legal and financial independence than those of many cultures, including the right to divorce and remarry. And for our purposes, canines, in particular hounds, were far more than just family friends. They were venerated, a must-have companion to pharaohs and ancient muckety-mucks, and moreover, a key player in the afterlife. Well, small world, because at that same time, on the other side of the world, canines played an oddly similar role in the life of many of North America's indigenous nations. In one such tradition, a spirit gathered all the creatures on Earth together to find the best companion for humans who, at that point, were yet to be created. While some creatures said they would steal the food of humans or tear them apart, it was the dog who said he had no greater wish than to live with humans and share their food, protect them, and help them hunt. Now, wait a minute. It seems to me that dogs were also integral to ancient Chinese dynasties, where ancient graves reveal the remains of canines ceremonially buried alongside humans, and where dogs played all manner of roles in culture and lore over a long period. Sort of like Dustin Hoffman, only cuter. And come to think of it, dogs were central to the beliefs of Aztecs and other Mesoamericans long before the arrival of Europeans. Among many of these isolated cultures, they were companions, guardians, hunters, and guides in life and afterwards. I'm Bud Bacone. This is the story of holy dogs, Xoloitzcuintli, Quintly, Lhasa Apsos, Greyhounds, Chihuahuas, and sure, St. Bernards. And how it is that for thousands of years, so many disparate cultures in so many different places, in so many different eras, all chose to infuse canines in their spiritual lives and folklore. Time we all ask that timeless question: is there a dog? It was rhetorical.
What is a dog? How much is a dog worth?
The sport of dogs is one of the cleanest and best regulated of all the organized sports.
I am 50% setter, Irish setter.
Today, there is no question of the dog's place in society.
Isn't that so, Lassie?
Down and Back. Stories from the AKC archives.
This is the show for you.
With Bud Bacone.
This pup is more than a pal.
You remember from last class Settle? Settle. Dogs in North America likely began with a strain of wolves evolving into an affinity for humans at the conclusion of the Ice Age. Some of those humans and dogs crossed the... Anyone? Benson.
The Battle of Bunker Hill.
Anyone?
Oh, the Bering Land Bridge.
Correct. They crossed the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas. This will be on the test. That's one version of the human canine origin story. Ojibwe tradition takes a different tack. The legends say that two Ojibwe men were to go fishing for food for their tribe in a mighty birch tree canoe. While on their way back, they found themselves in the middle of a great and powerful storm. Soon the men had little strength and little desire to paddle. They gave themselves to the wind. Finally, their canoe was blown onto a strange beach. Relieved to be on the stable land, they began to look for food before finding a place to lay their heads. Scared and shaking, the men took cover in the bushes. As they crouched low, a big arrow, too large for any man, thudded loudly into the ground. A giant emerged from the trees. He was so large, a caribou hung from his belt with ease, limp like a rabbit caught while hunting. "You are safe, tiny ones," the giant told them. "I saw your tiny boat wash onto the shore. I wish to help you return to your home." The men were happy to follow the giant to his cave. They knew food was waiting for them at the giant's home, and soon they would know what else was waiting for them, too. As the Ojibwe and the giant sat down to eat from the giant's caribou dinner, an evil Wendigo spirit emerged from the entrance of the cave. He had come to trick the men. The Wendigo tried to confuse the men and convince them that the giant wanted to kill them. The men trusted their giant friend, for he had helped them. They knew the rumors. There had been enough lies from the Wendigo, so the giant knocked on a bowl at his feet. As he did this, a creature came bounding over to the giant and awaited his command. The giant shouted, "Dog, do what dog can do." The creature the giant called Dog turned to the Wendigo and jumped. As the creature sprang at the eater of people, he changed shape. He grew larger and larger and larger. Dog took one last leap and took the spirit down in one sweep of his powerful paw. When dawn broke, the giant and Dog took the men to the shore, and the giant gave his command. Again, Dog grew larger and larger and larger. The giant then picked up the tiny men and placed them on the dog's back. Before the men could speak, Dog ran into the open water. The men could do nothing. They looked back at the giant while he waved from the shore. Yes, Dog was the giant's pet. He knew the tiny ones needed Dog much more than he needed Dog now. After a very long time, the Ojibwe men began to see a familiar coastline. Dog swam to the shore and became smaller and smaller and smaller, forcing the men to swim the last leg of their journey. Dog then left them close enough to the tribe's camp so that the men wouldn't get lost, but far enough that they wouldn't be seen. Once they reached the sand, they were safe. Many days passed. The men had not seen or heard talk of Dog in a long time. It wasn't until one night that the chief confronted the two men. "You lie. There is no Dog, no such creature. This mystery animal does not exist. Show us this creature, and we shall let you stay here." There was rustling in the woods. It was as if Dog had been summoned. Dog came shooting out of the woods to greet all of the people. Dog allowed the tribe to pet and feed him from their hands. He was friendly and protective. Dog took his place in his new home and lived happily. There's little known about ways canines might have been bred by the first people on this continent, though oral histories provide rich insight into the canine-human bond over those thousands of years. Ancient Greece, Europe's cradle of civilization where mythology, deity, and folklore intertwined like Saturday foot traffic at the mega mall. Greek gods are often depicted with loyal hunting dogs, others with guardian dogs, and of these, few as widely feared as the Hound of Hecate. Hecate being a goddess associated with the underworld, witchcraft, and necromancy. Often she's shown accompanied by enormous Molossian-type hounds. Of course, people then were more prone to fall for superstitious... Okay, let's put a pin in Greece and move on. Josh? In the world's loftiest chambers, in some of its greatest civilizations, there were dogs and there were hounds. For everyday lunch bucket Egyptians, mixed-breed dogs, ferals, and strays roamed the neighborhoods. But up there, in the palaces and great homes of the nobles, there lived the hounds. They were sleek, elegant companions, superb hunters, and suitable only for the highest in society, the highest of all being the pharaoh. A pharaoh's possessions were crafted to make a statement: I'm a god, and you're not. A message no mere dog could convey. Dogs were lowly things, where a hound was an extension of the pharaoh's divine majesty. The breeders served Pharaoh well. The more beautiful and haughty the hounds became, the more they were regarded as household gods. Greek historian Herodotus records that they were so venerated by Egyptians that when the hound of a noble family died, the entire household would, I'm translating from ancient Greek here, shave their whole body and also their head as a sign of mourning. A century ago, one canine authority wrote, "The earliest records of Egyptian dogs show greyhound-type animals. They are all long-backed, somewhat high on the leg, with remarkable muscle development, and have a typical, somewhat narrow head. As with today's greyhound, their construction is colorfully described in an old bit of doggerel.
A greyhound should be headed like a snake and necked like a drake, backed like a beam, sided like a bream.
Bream being a species of flat-sided fish.
Footed like a cat and tailed like a rat.
Tradition suggests that it was the part-canine god Anubis, known as the dog who swallows millions, who guided the soul to judgment in the afterlife. It's widely speculated that the Basenji inspired the image of Anubis, though whether he reflected Basenjis, greyhounds, jackals, pharaoh hounds, bisons, gods only know. With the decline of ancient Egypt, the noble sighthounds lost their divine status, though one notable hound in medieval France would win some of it back. The legend of Saint Gwynefert is set in Lyon, France. A knight and his wife went for a stroll around their estate and left their baby boy in the care of Gwynefert, their trusty greyhound. Upon returning to their castle, the lord and lady beheld a terrifying sight. The crib overturned, the baby gone, and Gwynefert's jaws dripping blood. The enraged knight impulsively drew his sword and killed the hound. Moments later, the baby was discovered asleep behind the toppled crib. Beside him was the carcass of a venomous snake, mangled by dog bites. Gwynefert had proved his loyalty and courage by slaying the deadly viper to protect his helpless charge. The legend of Gwynefert's heroism became a mainstay of the region's folklore. Eventually, peasants proclaimed Gwynefert a saint, venerated for his supposed healing powers. During secret rites in the woods, the sick would pray to Saint Gwynefert for restored health. This brand of DIY canonization didn't sit well with the church, which harumphed and guffawed for centuries without effect, as commoners of the French countryside performed the rites of Saint Gwynefert. Hounds, holy or otherwise, remained a blue blood staple. From Alexander the Great to the last Russian czars, nobles looked all the nobler with a haughty hound in tow. A British law enacted 1,000 years ago warned, "No mean person may keep any greyhounds." To paraphrase the signs by the theme park rides, you must be at least this rich to own one of the great hounds. Inevitably, the world went to seed, and today anyone, even those of us among the great unwashed, can own these magnificent four-legged former gods. While back in ancient Greece, and I hope it's everyone's nap time, we were discussing the goddess Hecate and her feared hound, believed by some to be the transformed Queen Hecuba of Okay, we'll pick this up later. Which way to Marathon? Meanwhile, elsewhere in antiquity, Another breed had won the hearts of royalty, one that began life as a lion and transitioned to canine, but not without some godly intervention.
You're listening to Down and Back, stories from the AKC archives.
Among the ancient dynasties of China, we know that the Pekingese may not have itself been a god, but they certainly had friends in high places. Goes the story. A lion fell in love with a monkey and begged the gods to shrink its size so its love could be requited. The gods obliged, and the Fulin, or lion dog, was born. In the more prosaic world of husbandry, breeders did a masterful job. The Pekingese bears resemblance to the lion-like features of Chinese art, though with a caveat. The artists had nothing to reference, the lion having long since vanished from that part of the world. They relied instead on some combination of oral history and artistic license as a guide. The Pekingese carried its divine pedigree through the ages as companion to only the highest ranks in the royal court, complete with their own eunuchs, working out of the dog-raising office. Only in the last few generations was the Pekingese loosed from its noble confines to become an international treasure. Today, Middle Eastern convention holds that dogs are unclean, a nod to the ancient attitude of pariah dogs. Yet, there are some godly exceptions. Within Islam, the 18th surah of the Quran tells the story of the cave in the years long before the Prophet Muhammad.
وَتَحْسَبُهُمْ أَيْقَاظًا وَهُمْ رُقُودٌ.
A small group of young men devoted to the Prophet Jesus found themselves persecuted and fled to a cave. Among them was their dog. There, God cared for them, calming them into a deep sleep. And there they remained asleep for centuries, as their faithful dog lay with its arms stretched across the cave entrance. In time, they were awakened to be shown that no persecutors remained, and that all in the city had become believers. Especially poignant is a passage that speculates as to how many were in the cave, each time counting the dog among the numbers, recognition of the canine's honored place in the group and in the story. Now, it's worth noting that elsewhere, the Quran notes that game caught by a domesticated dog is not considered ceremonially unclean. Which breed that might be, we can't say. Though it might not be out of line to imagine a Canaan dog, rugged, agile, tireless, clever, and confident, and one of the oldest breeds known to AKC. Judeo-Christian scriptures paint no inclusive or flattering pictures of dogs, who are often associated with violence or uncleanliness, and sometimes symbols of the demonic. But that doesn't preclude instances of four-legged friends in holy places. Witness the writings of English poet, author, civil servant, and friend of the show, Geoffrey Chaucer. In his prologue to the Canterbury Tales, he writes about Madame Eglantine, devoted dog fancier and cloistered nun, who joined the pilgrimage to Canterbury.
And she had little dogs she would be feeding, with roasted flesh, or milk, or fine white bread. And bitterly she wept if one were dead, or someone took a stick and made it smart. She was all sentiment and tender heart.
In a time when nuns typically came from wealthy families, with all the luxurious trappings including beloved lapdogs, they simply ignored the admonitions of disapproving bishops to remove the dogs altogether from medieval convents. Sometime 350 years ago, in an alpine pass between Switzerland and Italy, some 8,000 feet above sea level, monks at Great St. Bernard Hospice acquired the first of their eponymous dogs, descendants of the Mastiff-style Asiatic dogs brought over by the Romans. Servants, known as Maraniers, escorted travelers to and from the hospice and Bourg Saint-Pierre, a municipality on the Swiss side. By 1750, Marronniers were routinely accompanied by St. Bernards, whose broad profile helped clear paths in the snow. In time, they discovered their dog's gift for scenting and discovering people buried in the snow. Their broad chests helped to clear paths for travelers. The Marronniers soon discovered the dog's tremendous sense of smell and ability to discover people buried deep in the snow, and sent them out in packs of 2 or 3 alone to seek lost or injured travelers. Over 2 centuries, their St. Bernards would rescue some 2,000 men, women, and children, a secular canine bred by a holy order doing holy work. In 1959, a 24-year-old Tibetan monk slipped quietly across the border to India as tensions soared between Tibetans and the People's Republic of China. The 14th Dalai Lama has lived in exile ever since. Monasteries and their monks remain, including those of the Tibetan capital, Lhasa. Places where ties to special breeds of dogs are deep and spiritual. Meanwhile, some say packs of wild dogs living near Tibetan monasteries, many cared for by monks and locals, are souls of those who sinned as monks, and by karmic consequence are reborn as dogs who gravitate to the monasteries they once occupied. Over the centuries, remote monasteries bred the Do-Kai, or Tibetan Mastiff, as a guardian against thieves and other threats. Its cousin, the Tibetan Spaniel, would serve as a companion, but also as a watchdog. In some monasteries, dogs take part in the monk's spiritual life through rituals, mantras, and prayers. As one Lama put it, this puts wholesome marks on their spiritual continuum and helps them lead a happy and fulfilling life. In a faith based on a wheel of rebirth into different bodies, and connected to karma, the canine can play an elevated role. It's believed that one might return as a dog just before coming back as a human. It's thought that the souls of lamas or priests are frequently reborn as this fella, the Lhasa Apso, before returning as humans. As with China's Pekingese, the idea and lore of the lion runs deep in this breed, aptly nicknamed the lion dog. Tradition holds that the Buddha rode to earth on the back of a lion. In Tibetan folklore, the country's protector is the mythical snow lion, and the Lhasa Apso is its earthly incarnation. An act of spiritual alchemy that just has to warrant an AKC breed biography. In Tibet, they're known by their original name, Apso Seng Kai, meaning bark lion sentinel dog. Lhasa is the name of Tibet's capital. Dating back at least 1,200 years, they lived much of their history in isolation within the forbidding Himalayan mountains. Standing less than a foot high at the shoulder, Lhasas are small but hearty dogs of aristocratic bearing. They're famous for a floor-length, flat-hanging coat, parted in the middle and draping each side of the body. A feathery tail curls over the back in the distinct manner of Tibetan breeds. The breed's fans say that dark, oval-shaped eyes peeping through lavish facial hair are the windows of a Lhasa's merry soul. The complete picture is exotic, elegant, and serenely well-balanced. In the late 1940s, dogs bred and given as gifts by the 14th Dalai Lama helped establish the breed in America. Meanwhile, in Mesoamerica, being a dog is rarely an easy gig, especially hanging out with the Aztecs some 3,000 years ago, when they were largely regarded as a good source of protein, as they were in several of the cultures we've been visiting. Here, at the top of this Aztec pyramid, offerings of blood, canine and human, were offered to the gods. Among them was Xolotl, the lesser twin of Quetzalcoatl. It was Xolotl, goes the story, who descended into hell and stole an enormous bone, which would provide the more powerful gods with the raw material needed to make humans. Of course, everyone knows humans can't take care of themselves.
Of course.
So one sliver of that bone was set aside to fashion a guide and protector. So was born the Xoloitzcuintli, which combines the god's name with the Aztec word for dog and mercifully reduced to Xolo. That would be these guys. Like the Egyptian dog-headed god Anubis, Xolo's symbolic role was to serve as a guide through the underworld, leading the dead across infernal rivers and into paradise. Today there are two varieties of Xolos, hairless and coated. In his journal, Christopher Columbus noted the strange, hairless dogs he encountered. The Xolos' numbers dwindled following the Spanish conquest of Mexico. The demotion from god to dog was devastating. Only in the 20th century was the breed revived, once the Xolos caught the popular eye through the art of Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera, and the efforts of British diplomat Norman Pelham Wright. It must be safe now. This feels like just the right moment to close the circle on the Greek tradition of Hecate, whose large black hound was known to...
Okay, circle open, Josh.
Wherever there have been humans, there have been dogs, not just in the places we occupy, but in our traditions, our folklore, and our faith stories. In humanity's first eras, a glorious garden of human cultures grew and blossomed on every part of the planet, many oblivious to the existence of others. As those cultures intersected, warred, clashed, occasionally reconciled, and eventually compared notes, some surprising commonalities emerged. And of those, among the most powerful, the most exalted, and the most charming are canine.
Down and Back, stories from the AKC archives. Visit akc.org to learn everything you could ever want to know about responsible dog ownership. Follow AKC on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at American Kennel Club. On X, at AKC Dog Lovers. And tell us what you thought of the show. If you're new to the show, subscribe with your favorite podcast provider to catch up on all of our past episodes. Founded in 1884, the not-for-profit AKC is the recognized and trusted expert in breed, health, and training information for all dogs. We actively advocate for responsible dog ownership and are dedicated to advancing dog sports. We actively advocate for responsible dog ownership and are dedicated to advancing dog sports. Excuse me. Research for Down and Back is provided by the AKC Library and Archives, the only national repository dedicated to the sport and enjoyment of the purebred dog. Learn more about the collections at akc.org/library.